Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to another round of Learn with Lo. Happy New Year, everybody. I'm excited to welcome you guys into 2023. I have some amazing stuff planned for the year. I think 2022 was one for the books, but I anticipate 2023 being even better. So if you guys have been on this journey with me, thank you so much for continuously showing up and listening and learning with me. This is where my passion is at. I want to help people everywhere really be able to kind of bridge the gap in their health and wellness journey, either where they feel like they've really been kind of failed or kind of brushed off by more of the traditional or conventional medicine route, but also feeling burned by diet culture. And where do we find that in between of really understanding the science of how our metabolism works? How do we loop in the importance of things like nutrition without getting crazy? How do we loop in activity and exercise and movement? How do we understand stress management, circadian rhythm, and really just live life to the fullest? Which will set a great stage for our conversation today, because if you were with us last week, we really got to talk more specifically about female hormones, the female cyclical cycle, and all of the sex hormones that go with it. Now, today's conversation won't quite be as nuanced to just women. This will extend to both my guys and my gals as well, but it really helped us set the stage for understanding that our hormones will change over time, right? And we know that there's going to be different stages of life, and for women, it's kind of like we talked about almost every decade feeling a little bit different hormonally, and how do those ebbs and flows of hormones change with age, change with stress, change with life circumstance, and then we're left kind of figuring out how do we navigate. What I really wanted to set the tone was based off of a conversation that I had with a potential new client last week, where we got into this world again, kind of stuck in the middle, right? Where we get two different schools of thought when it comes to medicine in general. We have more of the Western medicine approach that really treats hormone balance more as a replacement conversation, right? We hear about things like hormone replacement therapy, or we even get under the branch of things like birth control, right? Exogenous pharmaceutical interventions and therapies to be able to replace hormones that have gone lost and gone missing in the journey of life, right? Then we kind of have more of the functional medicine or the alternative medicine route that has the mindset of regulating your hormones and takes that more stance that your body has the ability to heal given the right environment, and we need to really embrace how do we restore your body's natural hormone production. So kind of seemingly opposite schools of thought here. So this is where our topic for today will come in of, do these two schools of thought need to exist at completely different ends of the spectrum? Or is there a space and a place where maybe these two worlds can coexist? Does it have to always be the replacement versus the regulation? Does it have to be a one or the other? Or can some people maybe benefit from both? And how do I know what I'm the ideal candidate for, and where do I want to kind of start on that journey? So last week, if you were with us, we really set the stage for talking again about a woman's hormone cycle. So all the way from menstruation to perimenopause to full menopause, we know that women are different than men. Not more complicated, not worse, just different. So women operate off of more of a 28-day infradian rhythm, right? We have our follicular phase, we have ovulation, we have luteal phase, and throughout that, our hormones like estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, they ebb and flow with those different cycle phases. Versus a male physiology is built more around the 24-hour circadian rhythm, where testosterone is highest in the morning, it falls as the day goes on, it's lowest at night, and then they start all over again the next day. So if we kind of even just compare side by side, women to men, we see that women won't have consistent daily energy and daily mood and daily appetite and daily craving. Not every day for a woman is like a copy paste of the last day. Whereas guys can kind of get away a little bit with more of a consistent flow and energy and mood, because they have a little bit more of a copy paste type of sequence to just how their hormones work. So I think where we start to get awry, especially as women, is that we have to understand, not to get into a big feminist patriarchal movement about it, but we have to understand that most of our standard American society is built around a male physiology. Even the whole concept of working a 9-to-5 job, the whole concept of kind of that like grind and hustle culture, it is really meant to align to more of a male physiology, where every day they can just rinse and repeat, rest and recharge, and they're ready for the next day. Whereas we as women tend to carry things over a little bit longer. We might require a little bit more time and recovery from things like that. And we just are expected, though, to operate under the same kind of 24-hour clock that a guy does. So this is where our conversation starts to come in today, because when we as women are forced into a hormonal pattern that's not in alignment with our natural cycles, that's where we start to see issues. And that's where then we start to chirp up because we don't feel great. And that's where we start to kind of seek out some of these regulate versus replacement conversations. So just recognize that I think it's more apparent for women, but it definitely works for our males too. Anytime that you are operating out of alignment with your natural hormonal rhythm, that's where issues arise. I'm not saying like a one-day, one-off situation, but like chronically living out of alignment with that, you're going to start to see issues. So we have, especially like I said, when we start to talk about things like women operating in a very like male kind of driven physiology, not only our overall circadian rhythms, but we have women that are eating out of alignment, right? They're trying to follow things like keto and intermittent fasting that like very much favor more of a male physiology. It's not good or bad, it's just different. So it's like we have women out there trying to diet like a dude. We have women out there trying to hustle and grind this like high intensity exercise. We have women out there that are trying to bust themselves in more of a 9-to-5 cyclical pattern job and working their way through lunch, right? And it's like, no wonder we have an array of hormonal imbalances, because we have people just operating outside of the ebb and flow of their natural hormonal cycles. Like I said, this extends to guys too, because being that kind of 24-hour circadian rhythm creature, we're supposed to be connected to nature. We're supposed to be connected to that light and dark cycle of the sun. So I even see this a lot of times with my guys that get even in more like executive roles. They work inside all the time. They're in front of screens 24/7 and all this blue light exposure. So it's again, like we can extend this into even guys working out of alignment to their 24-hour circadian rhythm cycle, and women eating and exercising and working in a way that's out of alignment with their 28-day infradian rhythm cycle. So we can kind of start to see and extrapolate where diet culture and certain exercise patterns, eating patterns, light exposure patterns, struggle sleeping, stress, alcohol, caffeine, we can start to see where we can throw off our natural hormonal cycles pretty easily if we're not careful about it, not to mention all the downstream impacts that come from that as well. But then when we start to really see and experience these is when we start to notice the longer that we're out of alignment with these rhythms, that's where you're going to start to bring up some of these hormonal imbalance symptoms. You're going to experience things like fatigue and anxiety and cravings and weight gain, changes in libido, gut issues, insomnia, and especially, like I said, in kind of the traditional medicine route, when we go to a health professional kind of I say complaining, but like struggling with those symptoms that are very valid, we tend to either kind of be brushed off because, oh, your labs look normal, or we're given a therapy that kind of just like shuts it off. It's like, okay, let's not busy ourselves with asking why you feel that way, but let's just shut it off. Let's just go ahead and take care of that for you. That's where, especially for like females, we get offered really kind of the quick fix of more of like, here's a birth control pill. I'm telling you right now, you cannot opt out of your hormones. You can't just say like, oh gosh, these are just too complicated. These I just are too uncomfortable. I'm just going to opt out. It's like, You can't just opt out of that. You want to ask big picture of like, ooh, pause. My body's trying to communicate with me. Step back a second. Why am I feeling those types of symptoms? And how did it get there? Tracing those types of things back is where we can start to really have a conversation around bringing things back into alignment, both through regulation patterns, but also replacement patterns. And I don't think that both of these conversations have to exist at complete opposite ends of the spectrum and you're either one team or you're the other team. If you know me, you know that I tend to help people really manipulate and operate life in that gray area, right? We don't need extremes of anything, but we also don't need to deprive ourselves of any options that are out there that might help us feel better. So let's kind of dive into these two camps a little bit more so that you might be able to relate like, okay, where do I tend to fall? Most people, when I start this conversation, they kind of lean one way or the other in terms of their understanding and comfortability with how they want to navigate realigning hormonal balance. So I want to really give the ins and outs because maybe you're like, gosh, I don't even know where I fall. I'm not even sure what I understand right now, let alone being able to kind of like pick a side if I have to pick a side, right? Or being able to navigate what does the mix of those two look like for me. So let's kind of start on more of the functional end of the spectrum, right? More of the functional medicine, alternative medicine, where we really have this conversation around regulate your hormones, right? So regulating our hormones takes that understanding that we know all hormonal inputs start in the brain. The brain is the boss. The brain is dictating how that hormonal message gets out to the body, what actually happens. The brain is always communicating with the thyroid via what we call the hypothalamic pituitary axis. The brain is communicating with the adrenals via the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. The brain communicates to the ovaries or the testes via the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. So we know it's like boop, 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 trace it all back. We got to start in the brain. We have to understand how does the brain operate? How does the brain dictate that message from the top down? If we want to seek more natural hormone regulation patterns, it's going back to the level of the brain. And the brain is constantly scanning the internal and external environment for states of stress. And this can be perceived, not perceived, internal, external stress, all sorts of things that your brain is kind of looking for to send those downstream mechanisms. Is your brain sensing emotional stress? Is your brain sensing stress because there's low energy availability? Is the brain sensing stress because we're chronically dieting? So maybe we have some micronutrient deficiencies going on. Maybe our brain is sensing stress because we're over exercising for the amount of rest and recovery and rejuvenation that we're giving our body. Does the brain sense trauma is coming up, whether past or repressed or current emotions? Is the brain sensing things like gut or systemic infections? Look at that. I mean, the brain is looking everywhere. And if it senses things are off and it's not really a great time to kind of like ramp things up, that's where the brain is going to start to pull back a little bit, pull back the reins. I can't afford to waste any extra energy. We may need to put reproduction on the back burner for a second because I'm sensing some more higher priority items out there. So when we talk about regulating your hormones, we want to look at the body as a whole interconnected part, right? We don't want to just think about the sex hormones over here and my thyroid over here and my adrenal over here. Like I said, it all connects and it all connects back to the brain. So if we want to regulate our natural hormone production, we have to ask why. Why did we get off in the first place? Why is my body deprioritizing thyroid production? Why is my body deprioritizing sex hormone production? Why is my body down-regulating ovulation or testosterone production? So we have to go back and look at what's that overall message coming from the top down. And this is where practitioners like myself thrive, because we like to really look at the root cause. And this is going to go back to individuals that are genuinely interested in learning How is my nutrition impacting this? How is my exercise and movement impacting this? How is my circadian rhythm, my sleep, my overall ability to manage stress, my relationship with substance use like caffeine and alcohol? All of those different stressors that the brain may be perceiving are going to be something that we want to address and take off the table and really start to look at, okay, so when I take those stressors off the table and my brain isn't sensing those stressors anymore, oh, wow, look at that. My thyroid started to produce well again. My body started to ovulate consistently again. My testosterone levels are up even though I didn't touch them, right? It's like, yes, this is how that process of self-regulating your hormones works when we go back to understanding the top-down influence from the brain down. So that's kind of the functional alternative world on regulating your hormones through some of those foundational things like food, nourishing food, exercise, stress management, circadian rhythm, sleep, light exposure, alcohol, caffeine, all of that jazz, right? That's our wheelhouse. Then you kind of navigate over to the other team or the other camp, which is more of the traditional medicine route that goes towards replacing your hormones, right? So when we think about hormone replacement, that's where we start to, like I said, look at objective numbers like labs. We start to identify, oh, yep, estrogen's low. Oh, yep, progesterone's low. Yep. Your T4, your thyroid production is low. So we look at these labs and we start to identify areas where our body has pulled back the reins a little bit. And it's like, oh yeah, that's not functioning at highest capacity anymore. And what we do is we go in now more and just help the body boop, replace and close that gap using things like thyroid medication, Synthroid, levothyroxine, all of those types of things. It's like, oh, your thyroid's not performing. Here you go, right? Take this. Or we look at things like, oh yeah, testosterone is low, estrogen's low, progesterone is low. Boop, here we go. We'll just put in some bioidentical hormone on top of it to help close that gap that your body isn't producing right now. So we have kind of two sides of the coin. And like I said, I'm sure you guys have heard of maybe some of those thyroid therapies, some of those hormone replacement therapies for both males and females. The hormone replacement side of things is where people start to have conversations around like creams, injectables, pellet therapy, right? Those types of things. So if you've heard any of those terms, that's what those individuals are talking about, is seeking out some hormone replacement therapy. So the pros of that, much like quicker fix, right? We're going in, it's like, oh, there's a gap here, we're just going to fill it. Now the con of that though is by kind of filling that gap, now all of a sudden that feedback loop is going back to the brain, and the brain's like, oh, I thought I turned the thyroid down, but apparently I didn't because there's thyroid hormone coming in. Right? So it goes back to that feedback loop to the brain. And so then the brain's like, oh, okay, maybe I didn't turn it off. So that negative feedback loop then does over time suppress your body's own natural ability to create that hormone, because the brain's like, why would I do it if you're just feeding it to me? Right? So there's kind of two schools of thought here around regulating from the top down or replacing the giant gaps that we might have because our body has downplayed that response as a sense of priority. So we have these two camps. It's like, well, which one's right? Which one's wrong? Which one's for me? I truly believe that both of these can coexist together. And I also am a big advocate of customization. This is not a blanket statement approach. I hate template medicine. I hate this cookie cutter approach where you walk in and like everybody leaves with the same thing. It's like, let's really take this into consideration here. Let's look at the whole picture and how much can we maybe benefit from both sides and what people might be best to kind of lean towards one side or the other. So let's just take some example populations because I think that's super helpful. So when I think about someone that would be a really great candidate for this self-regulate what hormones you can create on your own conversation would especially be according to age, right? So the younger you are, like my younger males, my younger females, like especially my females that are still menstruating females, even if your fertility goals are over, like 40 and below, if you're still having menstrual cycles, we want to have that regulation conversation, right? It's like we're still ovulating. We just need to enhance that brain to body connection. Let's start to really talk about ways that we can utilize things like nutrition, stress, sleep, even some supplemental stuff to try to remove the stressors and kickstart what you're already creating. That would be a perfect example. So I think age plays a part in this a little bit. The younger you are, the more you still have a lot of those reserves left. We just need to take the stressors off and start to ask why. Then you kind of get to the other end of the spectrum and it's like, okay, who would really benefit from kind of that regulation conversation? This might be even when we get into more of my postmenopausal women, right? When we as women, we're all eventually headed that direction to where eventually our ovaries check out of life. They stop participating. They're like, I did my job. I'm moving into retirement life, right? So when our ovaries are done ovulating, which is defined as 1 full year without a menstrual cycle as being fully menopausal, or we measure things like FSH levels, right? So when we can see that the ovaries are done ovulating, we know that a large part of our body's ability to naturally create estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are blunted, right? So when we think about things like our sex hormones, there's kind of 2 different systems. We talked about this last week. Our adrenals do create some estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and our ovaries as women then create the rest. Same thing with guys. In guys, your ovaries in guys, your testes are going to create most of the testosterone, but adrenals create a little bit of it as well. So when we see that ovarian reserve or those ovaries go offline, now I'm looking at you, adrenals, like you're my best bet. So that's where push comes to shove. In menopause, we're really able to see how have we treated our adrenals up until that point. So I would say that regulation conversation is helpful for these individuals because we can talk about things like blood sugar balance and sleep and circadian rhythm and stress management and all of that good stuff, but they're only kind of operating at 50% capacity. So I think that those conversations are helpful for blood sugar balance and gut health and liver detoxification, but a lot of times my menopausal women do benefit from utilizing both and utilizing and embracing a regulation conversation as long as they're working with a licensed health professional that is an expert in hormone replacement, not just some Joe Schmo corner, right? Which is exactly why us at Renew Institute, we work on both, right? We have the capacity to help you explore the options for HRT safely and effectively. But then we also have my portion of where I come in with the nutrition and the gut health and the liver detoxification. And so it's like, I don't think that both of these schools or these teams need to be opposites. They can absolutely coincide together for the right individual to kind of benefit from both. So I think age plays a factor here. Also, like I said, looking at labs and kind of customizing that as well. But also knowing that whether you're in like a lower age bracket or still young, menstruating, we have a good capacity to still self-regulate. We just need to operate from a brain down approach. Whereas when we get more into advanced age and maybe less production from our ovaries or testes, especially when it comes to the sex hormones, that's where we can always loop in some of the regulatory stuff just for general metabolic health, but not being shy about opening up conversations around replacing some of those hormone reserves that were lost as well. So that's where I want you guys to just have a more gray area understanding of both these functional, alternative, and traditional and conventional medicine, because I think they're kind of routinely pitted against each other and make you think that you have to pick sides. You do not have to pick sides. This can be well, it depends. Who am I talking to? Who is this person? What is their past health history? What's their past diet history? What is their current metabolic health scenario? What is their age? Like all of these types of things should really go into making that decision on an individual basis. And there's not, like I said, a right or a wrong, a this or a that. when it comes to the regulation side of things, self-regulating the hormones that I already produce, but I want to open up that capacity and improve my body's ability to create my own natural hormones and ebb and flow those naturally, that's where my Revive, Restore, Renew You program was built for my ladies specifically, which is what we're launching here Sunday, January 8th. Here we are going live with my Revive, Restore, Renew You 12-week program, which I'm super pumped about. And it's going to walk you through 3 months of this entire conversation. How do I support my adrenals through blood sugar balance? How do I support my gut and my liver detoxification through nutrition and sleep and circadian rhythm? How do I manage my own natural sex hormone production and try to maximize my body's ability and support to create and manage and detox estrogen and progesterone and testosterone? So if you're looking for more focused coaching and education and support on the regulation side of the conversation, I would encourage you to look into my Revive, Restore, Renew You program. You can find that link at my bio on Instagram, and I'll also drop the link on this video as well too. So registration goes live on Saturday, and I would love to, Sunday, January 8th, excuse me. I would love to have as many women in there that are interested in that regulation side of the conversation. But otherwise, we always do one-on-one consultations at Renew Institute as well. If you'd like to meet with both halves of the equation here, that is what Dr. Melissa Lowski and myself do. You can call into our offices at Renew Institute, schedule yourself an appointment where you'll get labs drawn, and you can actually meet with both of us simultaneously through a dual consult process. And we'll give you our full spiel on both sides of the equation. Which side do we see you being a candidate for? Would you start with the regulation and move over to the replacement? Would you start with replacement and also support with regulation? Everybody is different. So if you're looking for a more customized approach to that, I would encourage you to call over to Renew Institute here in the new year and schedule yourself a dual consult with both Dr. Lowski and I. So if you have any follow-up questions, don't hesitate to ask. But hopefully this kind of started a great conversation for you to explore that gray area between functional and traditional medicine, or between the conversations around regulating my hormones or replacing my hormones, and not thinking it has to be a black or white choice, but really it's about what's right for you, being fully informed on your options. So have a wonderful rest of your Monday. Be on the lookout for more information around that Revive, Restore, Renew You program, as well as our next Learn with Flo slated for next Monday at noon. So tune in, and happy 2023.